Hey guys, Kiwi and Oz here to give you a video tour of the latest version of the Fantasy Insider Lineup Cruncher. In this video we'll run through the Cruncher features and then we'll have a look at some of the settings that help you get the most from the Cruncher and hopefully build lots of winning lineups. Okay, once you've logged into Fantasy Insider and signed up for your free account, we can go ahead and choose the sport we want to crunch lineups for. The crunches that are available change based on the active sports at the time. So for example, the BBL crunch will be available when the Big Bash cricket season starts. Alright, with the cruncher loaded, looking at that first row of the screen with the option of choosing the site we want to crunch lineups for. Then we can also select the contest slate that we want to work with. We can also click on Customize Teams, which allows us to select specific teams to build lineups with. Maybe you want to exclude a team from your crunch lineups, or you may just want to reduce that to a single game slate. Now, just to get a feel for the cruncher, we'll jump ahead and just use the cruncher in its most basic form. So let's go down and click on Crunch Lineups from All. Now, in reality, you're only going to have limited success if all you do is crunch the default projections and enter those lineups. It's actually by tweaking the cruncher settings and projections and modifying the player pool that your DFS game can really benefit from the lineup cruncher. Okay, so looking at the crunch lineups, on the left we've got the generated lineups based on our standard settings. Only the top 2 full lineups are visible to free users, while premium members will see 10 lineups by default. On the right we've got our player usage or exposure across those crunch lineups. Now this table is always a key resource for me. It's a really quick way to see which players on the slate the cruncher loves. And in this case, Cruiser, Ross and Simpson offer such good value that the cruncher wants 100% exposure to those players. So I'll often have my own ideas about a slate before opening the cruncher, but I'll always compare cruncher exposures to what I had in my mind. And those players with really high exposure are often the first players that you want to include in your shortlist. Now, both free and premium users have the option of modifying individual player exposures at this point, and then have the cruncher generate new lineups based on those exposure targets. So for example, if we decided we only wanted 50% of Simpson in our 10 lineups, we can change that and apply it. New lineups will be generated. It's worth noting you have to change one player and apply them at one player at a time. Premium subscribers can also set global and individual exposures using the advanced settings. Now let's take a look at the generated lineups on the left. Now these can obviously be entered as is, or further fine-tuned at this point. If you like the look of a lineup, except for perhaps one player, we can go ahead and remove that player and then have the cruncher find the next best replacement. A feature I find really useful when entering multiple lineups is marking the lineups as entered, as you go. Now, as you enter lineups, you're able to click on View Exposures to check your player usage for the lineups that you've entered and make sure that exposures are staying in line with what your targets are for that game. Okay, let's jump back to the top of the screen and check out some of the features and settings that customize the way that lineups are crunched. The import-export features are something that's available for premium subscribers. It allows users to export slates with or without projections and then import their own or third-party projections back into the lineup cruncher. Now this allows users to use their own projection set or model and just use the power of the lineup cruncher to build optimal lineups from their own projections. Premium subscribers also have the option of customizing cruncher settings, including setting player exposures. Now we'll come back and have a deeper look at these settings in another video, but it's worth highlighting that by default, the cruncher is going to produce 10 lineups with 2 unique players per lineup. The projection slider bar is another useful feature available to premium subscribers. This allows users to adjust projections sort of closer to players' floor or ceiling scores. Now, standard player projections represent what a player should mostly score in that specific game, but applying pure DFS game theory, we really need to target floor scores when building cash game lineups, and likewise focus on a player's ceiling score for GPP lineups. Now, using a player's absolute ceiling is probably optimal for things like target tournaments or maybe winner-take-all type games. But mostly, I like just sliding 1 or 2 clicks towards ceiling to get the kind of projections that I'm looking for building GPP lineups. Now, the more actions drop down allows premium subscribers to save and load projection sets and lineups. Personally, I find the ability to save projection sets really handy for games where you have a few days to plan and fine-tune player shortlists and sort of tweak your projections, like a grand final or state of origin type of games. As well as any custom projections, the save projections feature will also save any lock or excluded or player shortlists that you've built for that slate. Now, the next row of Cruncher options are viewing filters. Changing these filters changes the visible players in the Cruncher, but it doesn't change the player pool that the Cruncher will work from. If you want to change the player pool, we have to go and change it through the slate drop down. But we're able to select players by position, search for them by name, or filter individually by teams. The filters are really handy when you're working with the player data, modifying these projections and sort of refining your player pool. Now, the player projections window itself lists all the key info. Each of these columns is sortable, which is super handy. And I find this data particularly useful if I'm sort of manually building 1 or 2 lineups or working through and building my shortlist for multiple lineups. I can filter by position and then see who the Cruncher sees as the best value in that position, who they see as the highest projected score in that position. You'll notice that players marked with orange, now they indicate that they haven't been included in the team list. Players that have a light green circle are generally included, but they're on an interchange or bench, while the dark green players are the guys that have been named as starters. You'll notice that some players have warning icons. Now this indicates that the projection's based on a limited number of games for that player, so their projections can be a little volatile. In terms of the projections themselves, free users will see an average of each player's last 5 games as their projection, whereas premium subscribers will see Fantasy Insider's custom projections, which take into account the specific game and player matchups to put together that projection. Now, all users are able to manually modify player projections, which is hugely powerful, because after all, it's there's a big edge in DFS for anyone who does their research, and they can identify when players will exceed their expected score. And it's by adjusting these projections that we can also add some uniqueness to our lineups. But maybe a certain player is going to be out, or you think they will get marked or tagged or in a new position, you can go ahead and increase or decrease their projection based on the game script that you forecast. We've also got the option of excluding or locking players into the lineup before being crunched. Premium subscribers can also add a player to a shortlist and then separately crunch lineups just from that shortlist. And I find that a super handy feature myself. Now, once we've been through, adjusted our projections, build our shortlist, included or excluded players, we can go ahead and crunch another 10 lineups and see what they look like. I like to continue to tweak the settings and crunch lineups over and over until I've got them sort of achieving my target exposures and the game scripts. And then once I'm happy, I'll go ahead and enter those lineups. Well, guys, this sort of concludes our video tour of the Fantasy Insider Lineup Cruncher. I hope you found it useful. Look out for other video tutorials, as well as our weekly previews and podcasts to help you get the most out of the Fantasy Insider tools. And finally, feel free to follow and like Fantasy Insider on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can contact the Fantasy Insider team anytime via their website if you have any questions at all, any suggestions or feedback. And good luck with your lineups, guys.